Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you in this second hour as we look at college sports, March Madness, all of those things. Oh, yeah, the money, the money, the money. The coaches make millions of dollars now. Athletes are looking to get paid as they generate billions, billions, billions for basketball, for football on the men and women's side. It's a big, big deal. And it's a big, 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 big world. And now, and if you've noticed, these athletes are recruited very aggressively. And even when they sign letters of intent, it's on television. But black and brown athletes, and black athletes in particular, black academic stars are not recruited with such vigor. Isn't that interesting? And now the Florida governor said we want to end, and we are ending DEI programs, but he's not alone. That's happening all over the country. The biggest DEI program, diversity, equity, and inclusion program you have going is in those college sports. So now the NAACP has said, we got one for you. Black athletes, don't go to these Florida institutions. Don't go there. If they don't want DEI, in all areas of Floridian life, then they shouldn't have it with you, and you should not be generating billions of dollars for these schools and the state. What do you think about that? I want you to go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, but I'm coming to you from AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. The voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to meet me over on Facebook as well on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's the only page where I can accept friends. And so I cannot wait to meet you there. But meet the Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And let's get into it. Let's talk about this because this has been an issue that has been fascinating, Clarence Hill, to me for years and years and years. And you are a sports writer of tremendous renown, Texas Longhorn. I saw you make those Longhorns just a few minutes ago. That's all right. That's all right. But that's okay. We love it. The Fort Worth Star Telegram. And you've been covering, well, everything's big in Texas. The Cowboys, the Rangers, everybody, everything. And you've been covering this for years. Before we go to you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, former president, past president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world. And of course, she's the chair of Rainbow Push. And we just got her coming off of Court TV, where she's a legal analyst. And Reverend Dr. Todd Deary from the national leadership team of Rainbow Push, a lawyer of great and growing renown, and the senior pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. And I think we've got Daryl Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Indeed, he and Barbara Arnline are the leading figures in voting rights in the United States of America today. Clarence Hill, what makes this call by the NAACP for these athletes to boycott Florida?
Well, I mean, I think it's in keeping with the empowerment of athletes. You talked about NIL, and athletes are getting more power, more empowerment. There's just a case now where athletes are I guess the courts have ruled that college athletes can form a union. And
up at Dartmouth, right?
Yeah, at Dartmouth, right. And so if you're going to have any type of impact, and you put it so eloquently, there's no bigger DEI than black athletes at these white schools. There's no bigger DEI program than that. And Emmitt Smith, former Cowboy who played football in Florida, Hall of Famer, the NFL rushing champ. I'm sure you're familiar with Walter Payton, from your Chicago days, but Emmitt Smith is the NFL rushing champ. But he came out last week, and it was after Emmitt came out that the NAACP came out. But Emmitt called for athletes to step up and people to boycott schools in Florida. You have to step up, because if we don't do it, how is it going to change? Mm-hmm. So if the athletes don't do it themselves, again, these schools care about money, and the biggest money maker for many of these colleges, the football program, the basketball program, where these black athletes are affected. And I know personally, if these DEI programs, especially some of these schools, especially some of these PWIs, predominantly white institutions, they have programs, they have things that help Black students get along with college life on those campuses. Whether it, at UT, they have different, programs and different community rooms and study rooms and things that you get together. They do a lot of different things with these programs that are being rooted as not just Florida, it's all over the country. Texas is the same way. They're in the same boat.
Uh, Everybody, please weigh in on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Want to hear what your thoughts are. Want to know what you think. Indeed, Black student athletes should reconsider attending public colleges and universities, according to the NAACP. They said it in a letter to the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, at the beginning of the week. The letter was in response to the University of Florida and other state schools that have eliminated their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. It was also addressed to current and prospective student athletes. So what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think? I mean, according to 2021 figures from the NCAA, the Power Five schools, the elite level of college football, basketball, Black athletes make up 55.9% of men's basketball players, 55.7% of men's football players, and 48.1% of women's basketball players. Now, when you go on these campuses, you don't see that many students. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what do you make of this bold move by the NAACP? And, think about it. In our Parents' Day, Clarence Hill and Reverend Dr. Yeary and Attorney Darrell Jones, all the big athletes who ended up in the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball, they were at Black colleges. That was the farm system. And and when you go down to the Bayou Classic, I mean, just think of the money that I think they should have a carve out for FAMU and Bethune-Cookman and for the Black colleges there. But beyond that, no. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what do you make of this?
Well, Santita, this is a major development. I don't know if it's such a bold move. It's an important move by the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
As you recall, last year, the NAACP issued a travel advisory for Black people, Black folks, when Governor DeSantis first came out with his ban on teaching Black history in public schools. And that would expand, when we say public schools, all public schools,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's high schools, elementary schools, as well as colleges. And just think about it. We've got some public HBCUs, FAMU, in the state of Florida. And so this is part two of what the NAACP is doing, and I think it's brilliant. Why do I say that? Seti, you know the perspective that I come from. Mm-hmm. Both of my children are predominantly white schools, and they play college football. So I'm living in this space. I'm living in the NIL space, so much so that I formed a new practice group. There's 6 partners, and we do NIL. We help negotiate contracts. We advise clients and their families on and on and on.
No, what is NIL? For those of us who don't know what NIL is, what is that?
NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. For the first time over the past couple of years, since there has been a law now that allows college athletes, and in some states, high school athletes, to benefit or to compensate it for their name, image, and likeness. Previously, what would happen is you had the schools making millions and millions and billions of dollars, quite frankly, off of the name, image, and likeness of these college athletes. And the irony was that during Emmitt Smith's time and other people's time, they would sign jerseys. Their name, image, and likeness was used mercilessly by the schools, but they themselves could not benefit from it because it was prohibited. The schools could make gobs of money, but they couldn't. So it's a great thing that now these college athletes and these high school athletes can get paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness, whether it's on cards, whether it's promoting materials, whether it's on all the marketing stuff that the schools do. Now they can get paid for that. Great development. So what power now do you have, and why is Emmitt Smith saying what he's saying? He's saying that because he recognizes what we've always known, which is college athletes, especially Black college athletes, have a lot of power in terms of determining what can happen in a collegiate experience. What do we mean by that? Well, remember, there was a lot of litigation surrounding the coming down of the Mississippi flag. A lot of litigation. A lot of people for years and years and years wanted these Confederate states, these former Confederate states, to bring down their Confederate statues, their Confederate flags. But it wasn't until some black athletes said, well, you know, I feel some kind of way and don't know if I want to go to Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, because this Confederate flag issue is causing some anxiety. And all of a sudden, that little flag came down. Oh, yes, it was the power of those athletes. Similarly, when you now have the NAACP saying, for all of those high school athletes that are considering Florida schools, do not do that, because Florida has a ban on DEI, diversity and inclusion initiatives, anything involving DEI, including positions, faculty, courses on Black history. There's a ban on teaching Black history. Imagine if you were a student going to a Florida college, a Florida public college, which is most of the big football schools and basketball schools in Florida, and you cannot take a Black history course. And by the way, people would get fired for teaching. By the way, there can't be any diversity and inclusion. Do you know how important it is for Black students at predominantly white institutions to be able to have a place where they can come together, professors that they can talk to, who talked about diversity and inclusion, and by the way, just how about Black history? That's critically important. And saying that you can't have that on a college campus is denying who you are. It's saying you don't exist. That's how I interpret it. That's how I look at it. And by the way, that's my lived experience having gone to always predominantly white schools. So the fact that the NAACP is saying, prospective college athletes, use your power. Refuse to go to Florida schools because money talks. All the rest of it walks, because we don't want to say that publicly, but money does talk. And if Black students, these 5-star, 4-star, 3-star athletes start saying, I want to go to Florida schools because Florida is not an environment where I will feel comfortable when I can't even learn or take a course about Black history, where there will not be a DEI representative, where all the DEI people have been fired, those positions eliminated. I don't feel comfortable in that environment. And by the way, I'm going to go elsewhere. That's so important, Santita. And NIL and this transfer portal is changing the face and changing the way that college football is being played. And the same holds true for other college athletics. So this is a brilliant move by the NAACP. They're putting the issues out there. I've always said NIL is a social justice / civil rights issue as much as it is about contract negotiations and money. So that's what I say about it.
Reverend Dr. Uri, your thoughts?
Well, I applaud the NAACP's position. Let me just say that it is in keeping with the tradition of economic impact that many of us have learned sitting at the feet of your father. I'll only take you back to the day that Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General of Kentucky, issued his determination that there would be no state charges brought against the officers who killed Breonna Taylor before the federal government stepped in to move forward with prosecutions. I was in Louisville that day because as Reverend and I and others had gone there, I was kind of detailed to be present as the city moved through its response, that they were attending to the issues of making sure there were legislative changes, making sure that there was public engagement and civic engagement with the advocate groups. I was sitting in a room with the mayor, the deputy mayor, the police commissioner who was acting at that time, or the police chief in Louisville, and others. And while in the room, a press release comes out, and it says Reverend Jackson calls for a boycott of all Black athletes looking to go to the University of Kentucky or the University of Louisville. And it got the mayor's attention right off the bat. I'm sitting in the room because at the end of the day, everybody knew and understood that the economic impact on school revenue, particularly through sports programs, absent the ability to recruit Black athletes, you're not going to make that kind of money. As a matter of fact, if you look at the numbers, the top 10 grossing schools on sports revenue gross about $2 billion a year. And about half of that money, give or take, maybe even slightly higher, is football. The other part mostly is men's basketball. So when we consider what this means, when we talk about the notion of unjust riches on the back of labor, where have we heard this story before in history? That the notion that state schools can make a whole lot of money on the back of many of them Black, that they did not have to pay. That was just a reincarnation of something that we would read in history, but for in Florida, they keep pulling it out of the history books and trying to tell us that slavery was a job training program. So let's be real clear that when you start talking about the economics, when you start pushing back and recognizing that the name, image, and likeness, the value of the skill, the personage, the presence of these star athletes that you're going to use to make literally hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And if they stay 4 years, let's just say that's $1 billion, round number, off of one sport, then there has to be some equity. There has to be some recognition of the value proposition. And too many times we've seen where when students were requiring that they got something in return, many times they would lose their eligibility because all they wanted was simple acknowledgement to take care of some basic needs, and they were getting jammed up. Let's not miss the fact that many folks lost their career because the prohibition of name, image, likeness, or contributions to students who were participating in these elite sports was not only frowned upon by the NCAA, it was prohibited. Now that the NCAA is really facing significant antitrust action, I think the Dartmouth players' push for unionization to be successful is going to change the landscape and the dynamic of what happens in collective bargaining amongst players. And let's remember what also shook this up just a couple of years ago is that when Deion Sanders was at Jackson State, and remember, he was able to recruit the top Black football player to Jackson State University. Absolutely. And get him from Alabama. That got everybody's attention when they realized that the Black students starting to recognize that there's pay to play in politics, there's pay to play on the field, and obviously it is in their interest, their economic interest. And if the schools and the NCAA as an association are going to make just unheard of money, not just in terms of revenue generated. Think about television rights. Think about we're in March Madness and all of the advertising revenue that's going to come from it. Let's not miss the fact that there is significant money that is going around right past the players who are making the money on behalf of the schools, and they have not been getting anywhere close. Zero, nil, many times getting punished for it if they tried to get anything for it. And so now I think it is just time that this injustice is corrected. So we applaud the NAACP. We thank Reverend for pushing us to always be aware that at the end of the day, it's an economic argument. And for Madam Chair, who popped back on and she's in a position where the camera is straight on her, looking her glorious self. I want her to keep doing what she does, because at the end of the day, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Dollars to donuts. But before I go to Attorney Darrell Jones, we do want to hear from you, and of course go back around the panel. Clarence Hill, you have been writing about these athletes on the professional and college, and I'd say even the high school level. You've been tracking for decades. Mm-hmm. Do they know how that they are what makes the system work? I remember during George Floyd, when the NBA said, "We're not going to play tonight." Now it was President Obama who called LeBron James, because he's an owner of the African basketball league, and said, "Look, stop this. We hear you. That's the end of it." But I said, wow, what a glorious opportunity that was missed. Because when the athletes didn't play, there was no game. There was nothing. Nothing. Clarence Hill.
Well, since you guys are all connected with Operation Push, I would like to say I'm also from the home of Freddie Haynes. You know, your new
Come on
chairman.
now. Yes.
Yeah,
Ah,
He's the president.
yeah, President Freddie
Yeah.
Haynes,
We
who does
love
great,
Dr. Hayes.
who does great stuff in Dallas, and certainly is on the forefront of a lot of stuff. But you know, I think the problem is it's not just the kids, it's the parents. You know, and um, I don't know if they individually know the power they have. And certainly, they're sort of gaining that, uh, especially with the NIL stuff. But over the years, you know, we've talked about, we've seen it. You know, why don't more black kids go to school, go to black schools? Why don't more black kids go to schools with black coaches? You know, because they're all have all thought about their own personal situations. You know, and I don't know if they understand the history that they have to be a part of a movement. I think that LeBron James, you brought up LeBron James and what they're doing in basketball and how they are moving and empowering themselves to advocate for social change, which is something that hasn't been done in professional sports, you know, since the days really going back to the Jim Brown, because listen, I love Michael Jordan, but they weren't really advocates for social change during that time. You know, that's one thing that has happened, at least, you know, in this new day of professional athletes, of being advocating for social change and using their platform to do things like that is one thing that LeBron has done that is very important for these young athletes to see and follow. But that's certainly something that I think that, you know, most of the kids don't understand the history of what happened before. You know, they only see what's in front of them, and that's still a problem in their parents. And you know, they a lot of athletes, especially college athletes and the five stars, it's only a step to the process of getting to the NFL or NBA. They don't really understand the larger impact that they can make on these schools and for people to come behind them. Because if you look at it, you know, the DI issue is not just about them. It is about them, but you know, they're taking money away from programs for kids on campus, organizations, you know, whether that's fraternal, you know, we wonder how this is going to impact the black fraternities and sororities or some other multicultural organizations on campuses, as well as scholarships. I know for a fact that kids in Oklahoma and Texas or in programs on those schools, they don't know they have scholarship allocated for kids, for students of color, for students from a certain zip code. They don't really know how they can go forward, how these new DEI laws will impact their ability to offer those same scholarships. And so that's why it's important to get in front of this and for athletes themselves to understand and their parents to understand how big this is and why they need to act now, you know, and use their power now not just boycott Florida schools, but all schools that have these DIA programs in place that are affecting students of color.
But you know, Clarence Hill, you bring up another point. You know, since for many people, this is a pathway out of poverty.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's another kind of family pressure. And so these kids would say, you know what, but I mean, because I can only imagine, and many of them might not have the family supports. You know, it used to, my brother played at UVA, played football, and it used to, but the coaches did nothing. Because my father would jump down on the field and he was walking up and down the sidelines too. But he played Big Ten football at the U of I, and he was an excited father. But he was also Jesse Jackson. They didn't want to touch him. But I have a friend who played at a Big Ten school. Actually, was a guy I used to date, and his father was a very big influence in his life, and he was a prominent member of the military. So when he sustained an injury, his father went right up to the school and said, okay, you all had my son. He got this injury playing football. So you need to not only finish his scholarship, but I want you to pay for him to get his PhD. Because he's not going to go to the pros. He was a pro prospect, all this, which I thought was, and his father, you know, because they're not accustomed to dealing with a dad. You know, because men relate to men very differently. I mean, let's just put it right there. They're gonna relate to you differently, CK, because you're one of the top lawyers in the country. They turn on TV and see you and get scared. You know, I'm just wondering how these parents, and since you brought it up, Clarence Hill, is there any way to appeal to them so that they know just how much power they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it because most of these scholarships, people understand they're 1 year renewables. I mean, they're you know, the idea that, you know, they're going to pay for you the PhD, that's really not generally on the table for most kids. So they'll, you know, they can, and you know, there's so much talk, and you've seen stuff in the media today with Nick Saban and guys, or how these kids are ruining college sports. It's not like it was in the good old days because they have power and they want to go places. You know, a lot of times these coaches are pushing kids out. They're sending them to the portal. It's not just kids leaving the portal for more money, but yeah, it has to. What CK is doing with the NIL, it has to be more information, more education to parents of the power that they can have, because these are conversations what you're talking about, being able to negotiate. You know, not just scholarships while they're playing, but beyond the playing field, things that, you know, it should be on the table for all kids.
Well, because they deal with you very differently, Daryl Jones, when they have to deal with a strong parent. And I'm not saying a famous parent, but a parent who has profound influence. That was the problem that the record industry had with Aretha Franklin. You had to go through her daddy. You couldn't play with her. Okay. So what do you make of this move by the NAACP? I'm so excited. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited with the move that the NAACP has made, and just extremely supportive of it. And I think that when Clarence Hill was speaking, and one of the things folks sometimes miss when we start talking about the DEI, because we were down in Florida during the Juneteenth for that week, and we were doing a rolling protest through the state of Florida, 15 different counties and jurisdictions in 5 days, regarding DEI and banned books and precisely these regressive policies that DeSantis and his colleagues in the state house there have put in place. But one of the things folks have got to remember, while we're talking about the student athlete and the call from the NAACP, which was just right on time for what to do to boycott the PWIs, because they didn't call for the HBCUs, only the PWIs that are in Florida. But we also have to remember this, right? That the athletes are social influencers, right? There's an influence that they carry on the campus. There's an influence that they carry in the community. They're program influencers as well. And that's the dollar connection that comes with all of this. But what comes with all of that? That's when we start talking about, as Mr. Hill was talking about, what the Black fraternities and how do they fall in this conundrum? What about the Black Student Union? What about the Black History Group? All of these programs are affected by these decisions. So ultimately, what we see happening in the state of Florida is this. We see citizens in the state of Florida, Black citizens, brown citizens in the state of Florida, that are paying their tax dollars that are going to this public university, right? We see the student activities funding coming from the Black students at the universities, public universities in Florida, their student tuition going there, federal funding coming there to fund policies, but they can't teach Black history. They can't teach that's the fundamental problem. And then you run into the book bans and all of this. So, I say that all of this really, when the NAACP puts it all together and they start pulling the Black student athlete away from that and saying, look, why are you going to invest in someone that's not going to invest in you? Why are you going to invest in someone that's not going to teach you your history? That's the wraparound that we've got to get in place. And I think that the more that message gets there, the less influence that the university will have in trying to sway these students to come there so they can make big money off of them. I agree wholeheartedly with the conversation right now that if you are a student that's coming from one of the poorest sections of the country and you're just trying to make it so that you can help your family, that's an incredible burden that's on you. And if they're throwing money at you, you're going to want to take the money to help your family, regardless of the situation. But there are other universities as well that will be willing to do that don't shun DEI in the teaching of your history. And I think that's where we have to really push. I simply love what happened at Jackson State University. That to me was just a shining star of what we should be doing. But I also think it's very important to understand, not simply the pressure that we're putting on that student athlete, because it's a lot of pressure that I think that's on the student athlete, but to understand what it means for that entire university, what it means for the Black community, what it means for the Black citizens in the state of Florida. Because, and I tell you, I believe CK will tell you that the state of Florida right now, the Black community right now, they are on fire over these issues. They're on fire over all the, all of the book bans, all of the stuff that's happening down there. They're on fire over it. And I look for them. I can hear the NAACP president down there right now as she's saying, that's right. Don't go to these public universities. Go to a Black school. And I think that's where the focus needs to be until we can shake it up. And I believe, and Brother Hill, help me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Texas is right on the heels of Florida with regards to its policies and what it's doing with DEI. So, we got to just shake it up. And this is the way to do it. Draw the attention.
And CK, because I think they need to have a carve out for Black schools.
Right. No. And let me just
PWIs shouldn't.
Absolutely. Because this whole NIL discussion and all the NIL money is completely bypassing HBCUs. And it's crazy because if we got to think about it, what NIL money can also do for the schools, because the reason why it's bypassing is because the philosophy is NIL money typically comes from two sources. Collectives, which are groups, organizations that are created, that are third party, supposedly separate from the school, but it might be, let's say, a University of Florida collective, a Miami, Florida, all the collectives. These are groups of alums that are putting in millions of dollars to attract these students, because we know that football, basketball, they're religion. That if there's one thing this is the irony of it, that unites people, a MAGA person and the most progressive, a MAGA person and a Black Panther will sit beside one another and high five and everything over a football game.
Girl, they'll play on the same team.
They're playing the same team, cheering, love, step outside the stadium, it's a different thing. Now, let me just give you a hypothetical, because I got to speak in hypotheticals because this could be a family member of mine, a client or something. And let me just say, Clarence Hill, for the record, my son is a member of Omega Psi Phi. Yes, he pledged, and my older son. So let me just tell you something.
Oh, he's wearing purple. Oh.
No, he's got Omega Psi Phi right there. Right there. It's on the, I just happened to notice that because when they pledge, they're super Q, as you know. They have become super Q. And so I'm in the super Q field right now. Everything is Omega. The gold boots are in the trunk of the car, all that.
I'm wearing green, but I'm a Delta.
And we know we got some alphas in the house. We understand all that.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm a me fi me. Let me tell you something that actually happened. One of my, I guess I got to just put out there. One of my sons was going to a job fair, not during the time when they had practice, not during the time when he was supposed to be doing drills, not during the time that anything that his responsibilities had anything to do with football, on his own time, which is when you do NIL work, you're also doing stuff in your own time, but he's going to a job fair because he understands life beyond football, right? And by the way, this job fair was sponsored by who? The Omegas. Do you know that there was a coach that came up to him when they got wind that he was at a job fair? This is a job fair. He's a junior, a job fair. And said, and actually cross-examined him about why he was going to a job fair and made it clear to him, your job is football.
Wow.
Okay, I want you all to know, these are my children. I've been a trial lawyer their entire lives. They've been at almost every single trial that I've gone to. And it has nothing to do with social economics. It has to do with this religion and what they expect. These kids are out there. They have a job. They don't have the luxury of calling in sick one day. If you're sick, you better be on the field that morning for practice. If you're sick, you better report that evening to your tutorial classes. If you're sick, you better be there Monday through Saturday. You might get Sunday off, perhaps, at least part of the Sunday, and you don't have a choice. That's quacking like a duck, sounding like a duck, acting like a duck, and it's a duck. It's a job. That's what they have. Then they have to perform academically so the school can maintain their NCAA status. These kids have jobs in college. Sometimes I just wish they were just students. So this NIL money is an equalizer. And by the way, for those maybe 98% of them, they do come from disadvantaged backgrounds. But those 2% of them, they will sign an NIL contract and want that money just as quickly as those who came from a situation where they don't have money, because they are 18, 19, 20, and 21. They're children. They don't know anything. And in those states where high school students can get NIL money, it's millions of dollars. Unbelievable for these 3, 4, and don't be a 5-star athlete. So it is what we have to do, what I feel part of. That's why I say NIL work is social justice work, and it's civil rights work just as much as it is about money. We have to educate those families so they understand the leverage that they have.
Wait a minute, CK. Let me ask you this, because Clarence Hill made the point, and and Reverend Dr. Urey and Clarence Hill and Attorney General, I want you all to jump in. But first, let me start with you, because you are a parent and one of the most prominent lawyers in the country. Who do you talk to first? The parent?
Who do I talk to?
The parent or the students?
You talk to the parents, because what we need to do is talk to them when they're in high school. So they're still under, whether the parents are in the home, or whether it's a grandmother, whether it's an auntie, whoever is the guardian of that child, you talk to them first. And you bring the child as well, because there's some kids that are 18, 19, 20 who are still in high school playing football. Hear me now. Yes. And they're looking for that opportunity to get picked up by a college, by a Division I. Power 5, both my sons last year were at Power 5 schools. I know the Power 5 situation. So it's so important, Santita, to educate them early. But let's say you just get them in college. If you get them in college, those kids don't have to tell their parents about a single solitary NIL deal, just like they don't have to tell them about their grades. They really don't, unless they sign a waiver. Do you think the kids, if they're approached and someone comes in and says, which is what happens, okay, I'm going to give you $100,000 a month, and what I want you to do is to endorse my product. So 4 times a year, I want you to make a public appearance, and then I want you to endorse on social media, and those are the rules of the game. Those kids will sign that agreement before they won't even read it. Talk about going to a lawyer, forget about that. They won't read it. They don't know anything about taxes. They will not pay taxes. They will not set aside money for taxes. They're not going to do financial plannings. They're not going to do all of that unless they have it in their mind and someone is leading them that way. The collectives and sponsors, they're about the Benjamins. They want to have these kids endorse their product or endorse them in any way. The school, they're about the Benjamins, because now a lot of schools, and it's governed on a state-by-state basis, they'll get a cut of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then you've got the athletes who standing there in the cut, who sees all this money, who can, the bling bling to the bling bling, their minds are completely distracted because now they're getting over $1 million a year in their bank accounts. It's going to be automatic deposit. Oh yeah, it's not going to be where they get a check. Automatic deposit. And when they get something from the IRS that says, hello, we see that you received this money and there's a 1099, but you haven't filed for taxes, that may make it to their parents, but it more than likely will either sit on the desk or go in the trash can, because they're not oriented to understand anything about paying taxes. If you come from a household where maybe your parents didn't pay taxes, because that trajectory or not that thought process, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying the way it is in your household, then you're not going to grow up knowing that paying taxes or the IRS or the state taxes and all that are part of what you do. And even if it is the case, you're going to rely on your parents, because you don't have the sophistication, Santita, as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, unless you have a structure around you.
But that's where a Deion Sanders at Jackson State makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
And that's where the HBCU makes the big difference. I remember going into doing a pre-college program at Carnegie Mellon, engineering, They took a few college people who were going to be college seniors, and they let us go to college for the summer with freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. It was a great experience. And I was so geeked on that experience. I remember my father came to get me from the program. And then maybe a week and a half later, Todd, you might have, well, no, you weren't there yet. He did the opening address at Morehouse, Labor Day weekend.
I was there. I was in King Chapel.
Okay. So I was there. And my father wanted us to walk around the AU. He wanted me, because I was a senior then. He wanted me to walk around the campus. He said, baby, I know you had a great time at Carnegie Mellon. He said, and if that's where you want to go, Daddy will send you. But because I'm landing on planet AU, Atlanta University, and I see thousands of Black people. Bumped into Reverend Moss's daughter, Daphne. God rest her soul. I mean, I'm bumped into all my friends, Rhoda. I mean, all these people like, ha, ha, ha. He said, now, when you go to, if you go to Carnegie Mellon, it's going to be a great experience. Hey, if you go to Harvard or Yale, it'll be great. He said, but that school will never belong to you the way this will. And the people who are going to be your professors are going to care about you in another way. So, baby, I just want you to look at that option. And when I'm looking at these kids, C.K. Hoffler, who can generate a Clarence Hill, Reverend Dr. Geary, Attorney Jones, who generate all of this money, and many of them, they have not had the experience. They need a Deion Sanders. They need a Coach Eddie Robinson. I mean, where would Doug Williams be without Eddie Robinson? I mean, I'm not saying that Black schools should be the only option for you, but I think these kids need special protections.
Right. Which, Santita, is what the DEI officers, call them what you will, what they provide for these children on campus.
But now they're gone.
Now they're gone. That's the problem. So they're in an environment where they're already employees, no matter what you call it, they're employees. I'm just injecting some of the legal issues. They're treated like employees, but they're not paid and they don't get employee benefits. They don't have insurance. They get injured. They're basically out, and many of them will lose their scholarships. That's right. They will be out of college because they may not be able to afford to get the college loans or the families and all that. So they're going to be gone. They're going to be dropouts. That's the reality of many of these students if they get injured. And in football, it's only a question of when, not if, but when. Okay. But there's no more DEI officers. You can't teach Black history. So they're not going to be African American studies departments anymore. Any of that in these places. So the professors that will provide that safe haven, and I know because at Smith, it was like that. It was the Black professors that provided that safe haven for us are going to be gone. And when it comes to, and many of the schools have programs that provide, and I think it was Clarence Hill that said that provide that buffer for the kids. Like in Clemson, it's called Pause Journey, where they go allow the kids to think and prepare beyond football. The kids that have competition so they can graduate, so they can, while being football players, have 3.0 averages and beyond, higher, striving, giving them all the tools for them to succeed that way. Those are very significant programs, especially for our Black and brown athletes. So when you start removing that, and it no longer becomes a priority, it's a problem. The only way to reverse that quicker than anything else is for those athletes to say, we're not coming. Because let's see how University of Florida is going to do without the Black athletes. And by the way, there's also a plug, and there are a lot of articles about this, to condition Black coaches to stop sending them to schools in states that are oppressive, like Florida, which is hand in hand with the NAACP has done. There's also moved for the Black coaches in all of these schools, who a lot of them step in there if there's not a father in the home, and even if there is a father in the home, these coaches step in and they provide guidance to the kids on which schools to go to. So if those coaches start thinking,
hold on,
Florida, it's going to be elsewhere. That's going to make a difference. And again, every child is different, but that's the essence of this move that the NAACP.
Absolutely, and
that
also
actually
when you
Reverend
have
Jackson did years ago, by the way. But like you said, Dr. Geary, years ago, Reverend was doing that. Reverend negotiated the benefits for the Harlem Globetrotters in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. So he's always been forward thinking in that way. But now
Absolutely.
the athletes are empowered.
Well, plus he had a horrible experience himself at a Big Ten school in 1959, and so he understood. And Reverend Dr. Sam Proctor
Yes.
saved him when he went. I mean, he talked his way into North Carolina A&T, and Dr. Proctor said, "There's something about this boy that lets me know, that makes me believe he's going to make it." And my father got to that school and never looked back. But I want to go around because we only have about 7 minutes left. I want to give everybody a chance to say something. I'm going to have Planet Hill wrap things up for us. Let me start with you, Daryl Jones. What's our takeaway today?
I think our takeaway is this. I think that one of the things we've got to do is we've got to be certain that our Black athletes, our Black students, not just our Black athletes, right? Because you have Black students that are going to the Florida schools as well. So we've got to be certain that we start directing these Black students, these Black athletes, these Black professors, Black teachers, away from schools that do not invest in and teach our history. And I think that the more we're focalized and more we're focused on serving our own community and being certain that our community is being treated fairly and adequately, the stronger our community will become, regardless of the state. And I love what CK was saying with regards to the movement for really it's the southern states that are just taking advantage of the Black athletes and really, not returning giving a great return on the investment with the education within the African American experience that they're teaching. So we've got to be certain that we're doing a complete wraparound of services with that, from the students as well as with the athletes, and where they're investing their dollars in these states, Santita.
Absolutely. CK, 1 minute for you.
Okay. We have to remember that when the Cosby Show was, and to me it's always been in vogue, and it will always be in
Yes.
the brilliance of the Cosby Show. We had Dr. Alvin Toussaint, who was a noted psychiatrist, psychologist, who actually said, and who stood for the proposition that we have to see ourselves on TV. We have to see the positive imagery. When you go on a campus and you don't see, there's no place for you to go, because all that is identified with your heritage, your history, that used to be there has been obliterated, eliminated, taken away. That has a profound psychological impact on these kids. So the takeaway that we have to do, and what we have to remember, is watch what's happening throughout the country as it relates to NIL. It's all related. Watch what's happening with the NAACP's directive. It's all related. We stand on the shoulders of Reverend Jackson on this. We know the impact that he's made in college athletics. And so watch the impact that this is going to have. It's going to be significant so long as our kids have the courage to say no to the millions of dollars, because you mark my words, those Florida schools, they're going to pile millions of dollars in their NIL money to those students to lure them. And they're already offering millions of dollars to these students.
That's why I'm so glad that you explained NIL to us. We're going to have you come back to talk about this. Reverend Dr. Yeary?
Well, when we talk about the religion of sports, let's remember that religion in America helped reinforce the slave system. It's just a different religion and a different system leading to the same outcome. And so when we consider students who are very often the first in their families to go to college, many times their parents don't even understand how college works. We have to build a system around them to help facilitate these conversations, because to Madam Chair's point, if privacy laws restrict the ability to disclose something like grades, if a student is over the age of 18, imagine an NIL agreement that has a confidentiality clause to consult with their parents. We have to look at those frameworks to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of, even with the prospect of NIL. When I consider, if you think about Air, though Michael went to UNC, remember when Nike was negotiating that contract, the agent for Nike had to go talk to his mama, right? And he was well over 18. We've got to engage the family, because we have to educate the system, lest they be economically exploited by our own effort. And remember, part of this is the state-funded HBCUs have been underfunded by $13 billion over 30 years. We have to, at the same time, push for better revenue sharing from the Power Five conferences to the state HBCUs that are in those states to make sure it's fair. And I can't let this go before getting this. I saw Brother Hill make the horns, but what he was really trying to do is throw this up because I understand. He understands.
Man,
He understands.
You know,
I figured I'd get it in.
Clearly, there was too much Omega talk on this show with me and CK Sons and certainly the great Reverend Jesse Jackson. You know, I understand you don't want to leave left out, so we don't want to leave 06 out. But I think that somehow there has to be an action plan on how to get black students away from those Florida schools. I mean, the NIL conversation is great. I think they go hand in hand, but NIL money is there at other schools. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just at University of Florida and Florida State in those schools. It's there at other schools.
Alabama, Mississippi.
They're not just those schools. You talked about what Dion did with Jackson State, and they got NIL money for that young man that shunned Florida State and shunned Alabama to go to Jackson State. They can make big money at Jackson State with NIL just as they can some of the other schools. And you see some of the other smaller sports are making NIL money. If you are that guy, 5-star athletes, they're going to make NIL money anywhere. It's not just, you don't need just to go to Alabama, Florida, or Texas, or Georgia to get your NIL money. So it's about educating, informing, and really continuing this conversation and keeping this conversation at the forefront. It's one thing for the NAACP to make that call this week, but it can't just be a 1-week push. You know, it's being part of the meeting. We have to keep it at the forefront of our conversations.
You know what? I put it at the center of the Rainbow Push Convention. Yeah. Put Emmett Smith on a speaking tour. Have him go from church to church to church. That's what has to happen. When these people see him and hear him, when they hear Deion Sanders, it's going to make a big difference. And that is what we need to do because we must save our children. I love everybody. Have a great weekend. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy being with you. Sending you much love. Clarence Hill, Omega Sci-Fi. And then 06, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey. Delta Sigma Theta, Santita. And then Daryl.
What about Daryl Jones? What about Daryl Jones?
Daryl Jones. Daryl, are you a GDI?
No. You know, I think Reverend Urey and I share the gold and black, and
that's what I said. Okay. She's a GDI like my mom. I ain't mad at you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Boom. I love y'all, everybody. Have a great